Welcome. My name is Ralph Crystal, as you know, and this is RC-610, which is Case Management in Rehabilitation Counseling. What I'd like to do today is to talk about this class, to kind of give an introduction to the class, and to go over some of the requirements and some of the expectations. First of all, you should have the course outline, the syllabus, on Blackboard. What I'd like to do is I'm not going to read everything to you, but let me read for you and then discuss with you what the purpose of this class is. And that comes from the course overview. This course emphasizes basic principles of helping persons with disabilities within the rehabilitation process, and is designed to foster an appreciation and knowledge of how various theoretical positions and research findings translate into appropriate rehabilitation counseling techniques. In this class, we are not only going to explore how theory and research are integrated in the rehabilitation process, we are also going to be talking about understanding the roles and functions of the rehabilitation counselor as the counselor works within and in collaboration with different rehabilitation settings, facilities, and agencies. And in addition to this, we are going to be talking about how individuals move through the rehabilitation process, going from intake to plan development, to plan implementation, service delivery, and then finally looking at achieving positive employment outcomes and independence, economic self-sufficiency, as well as quality of life issues. In your syllabus, we've got some objectives. I'm not going to go over all those objectives with you, but basically it's to look at and examine how we as professionals function when we translate the theories and translate the techniques into paradigms that address the needs and the issues and the circumstances of each consumer who is referred to us, and each consumer with whom we work. And we're going to be talking about counseling techniques in general, not specifically, but in general. We're going to be addressing how we utilize those techniques. We're going to be talking about how eligibility decisions are made. We're going to be talking about how we work with consumers to develop IPEs, individual plans for employment. We're going to be talking about how we help consumers identify vocational and career goals. We're going to also be looking at and examining how we work with significant others in the rehabilitation process and how we can facilitate individuals moving through that rehabilitation process. So we're going to try to do a lot this semester, and we're going to try to do this in a way that's enjoyable, that is interesting. Hopefully you'll learn a few things along the way, and we're going to be talking about the ways in which we function as professionals, both within the rehabilitation process as well as externally, particularly towards at the beginning and the end of the process, when we work with other professionals at the beginning, when we work with other professionals to identify information about functioning, where we communicate with others about functioning of consumers, and towards the end of the rehabilitation process, when we look at and examine outcomes, and outcomes with regard to working with employers and involvement of employers in the rehabilitation process, and looking at that transitioning the consumer into a job, and looking at whether modifications to the work environment are going to be needed, and working with the consumer and working with the employer to implement those modifications. So those are some of the things that we're going to be doing. The text for this class is also in your syllabus, and that you can order that through on the internet, or you can contact the bookstore at the university. And it's Rubin and Ressler. It's called Case Management and Rehabilitation Counseling. I believe it's the fourth edition. Whatever the most recent edition is, the one that you'll be using. And as we move in other semesters, there might be another edition that was published. Let me talk about requirements for the class a little bit. In this class, students are going to be expected to answer and post discussion board and discussion group assignments on Blackboard, discussing some of the issues that we've talked about and are talking about in class. There are going to be several case studies that you'll be given, and the case studies will parallel the materials that we're talking about. And we're going to be you'll be given a midterm examination, and you'll be given a final examination. And to break that down, that comes out to 30% will be for Blackboard, 30% will be for each of for the case studies, the 3 case studies. So that's 10% per case study, and 20% for the midterm, and 20% for the final. And if I'm correct, that adds up to 100%. So it's very important that you do the Blackboard postings. It's very important that you keep up to date with each week, that the materials will be available for a week at a time, and it's important that you work with your course facilitator to make sure that you don't miss assignments, and make sure that you post on Blackboard appropriately and on a timely basis. Okay, with regard to the things that we're going to be doing in this class, we're going to look at this class with regard to 8 different sections of this class. And those 8 sections are going to be the ones that are in the course outline. In the first week, we're going to be talking about an introduction to case management. That'll be via the readings that you have and PowerPoint presentations. We're going to be talking about roles and functions of the counselor and consumers in the case management process. And then in the second week, we're going to be talking about issues that relate to different areas of rehabilitation practice. And we're going to be talking about the public rehabilitation system and case management in that system in general. We're going to be talking about facilities, rehabilitation facilities, and we're going to talk about how case management works in those facilities, those instances. And we're going to be talking about private or proprietary rehabilitation practice and how case management functions in private rehabilitation settings. We're also going to be examining codes of ethics, and we're going to be examining the way in which we can function and maintain ethical standards within the practice of rehabilitation counseling. In the third week, we're going to be talking about eligibility issues, and we're going to be talking about eligibility determination. And we'll also be discussing, if we haven't already, but we'll be discussing in that third week, the difference between eligibility programs and entitlement programs, although I believe some of this material we will have already had discussed or at least highlighted in prior weeks. Then we're going to move into issues related to how the counselor and the consumer look at consumer choice, informed decision making, working with significant others, and eligibility determinations with regard to taking the eligibility and translating that into an IPE, individual plan for employment. And then as we move through that week, through the fourth week, we're going to be continuing that discussion and talking about different counseling techniques and how you might use different counseling techniques and theories with regard to assisting the consumer with personal adjustment, work adjustment, issues about choice, questions the person may have about decisions that he or she has made, as well as looking at using the counseling techniques to facilitate a smooth movement of the consumer through the rehabilitation process. Then, in week 6 and 7, we are going to be doing case studies. We might start this, we'll see, in week 4 and week 5, but we're going to be doing several case studies, and you'll be given assignments relating to those case studies, and those case studies will be asking you to do such things as make recommendations as to any additional materials that might be needed. You'll be asked to look at those case studies and make eligibility determinations, and also make recommendations for an IPE. Now, these will be materials that we'll be providing to you, and we'll be asking you to address different questions regarding the case. And then finally in the class, the last week, we'll be focusing a little bit in more detail on ethical and multicultural issues, diversity issues, and rehabilitation practice. We will have already talked about rehabilitation practice in different facilities and settings, but we're also going to be talking about rehabilitation practice in different environments, whether those are urban environments, rural environments, and we're going to be looking at how some of the ethical and multicultural and diversity issues play out in those different environments. So that's a brief summary of what we're going to be doing in this class. As I emphasized to you, it's important that we work together in this class. It's important that we focus on being able to effectively understand these issues, understand and taking information that you've had from your other courses, particularly the counseling theories and practice classes, as well as medical and psychological aspects of disabilities, and seeing how we can integrate that information into the case management process, and how we use the case management process in order to facilitate and enhance the ability of consumers to have a positive employment outcome. So that's a summary of what we're going to be doing. If there are questions based on what I've said, I want you to raise those with your course facilitators, because they are the ones who can address the questions that you have. They will be the ones who will be grading your discussion boards and grading your papers. Certainly, if you do have questions, you are welcome to contact me or Dr. Rogers, and you can ask us those questions. If there are any problems, we certainly will be willing and able to address those. I do ask that with any conflicts or problems that arise, that you first try to work those out with your facilitators. If you come to us and you tell us that you haven't met with a facilitator yet, then we'll send you back there first to see if you can get it resolved before we intervene. But certainly Dr. Rogers and I are more than willing to help out and want to make sure that each student's experience is a positive and a successful one, because this is a program that I think is one that it's important that you feel welcome and you feel comfortable in, and you feel that you are able to be a good learner and be able to not just do the assignments, but benefit from those assignments, learn from those assignments, and be able to raise questions and about issues that arise. And hopefully by the end of the class, you can look back on this class as well as your other class and feel that it's been a worthwhile experience. And so we want to make sure that that experience is worthwhile, and it is positive, it is productive, and it is beneficial to you. So as you start this class, again, great to have you with us. It's great that you are involved in this program, and I will, and Dr. Rogers and I will be involved with you and let us know how things are going. And please, the more that you participate fully in the class, the more you're going to get out of this class, which is another way of saying the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. All right. Thank you.